Imagine you're at a local market, but there's one rule. You can only buy and sell using a single type of token, and that token is controlled by just one person. If that person doesn't like you, they can freeze your tokens overnight, and suddenly you can't buy food, import medicine, or even pay your own workers. For nearly 80 years, the global economy has worked exactly like this village, and the token has been the US dollar. But right now, a group of powerful countries is quietly building a second market with different rules, different technology, and no single gatekeeper. They call it BRICS, and by 2026, the foundations of this parallel system reach their most critical phase yet. BRICS began as an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but it didn't stay five for long. By early 2026, it evolved into BRICS Plus, officially welcoming countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Indonesia, together representing nearly half of the world's population, around 40% of global economic output, and vast reserves of food, energy, and raw materials. This is no longer a political club. It's an economic engine that no longer wants to ride inside a system designed elsewhere. The reason these countries want alternatives comes down to two tools that define modern financial power: sanctions and SWIFT. A sanction is essentially a global block button. If Washington disagrees with a country's actions, it can freeze assets, restrict trade, and isolate entire economies because most global trade still moves through dollars. In 2022, over $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves were frozen, and that moment sent shockwaves far beyond Moscow. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, governments quietly ask themselves a dangerous question. If this can happen to a nuclear superpower, what happens to us? When a country's wealth is held in dollars, it isn't fully in its control. It's effectively renting stability from another power, and that realization has reshaped global strategy. Sanctions only function because of SWIFT, the world's most important financial messaging system, connecting over 11,000 banks across 200 countries. Essentially the global banking group chat. Countries removed from it don't vanish politically, but they do vanish economically. Imports stop, exports freeze, and trade grinds to a halt. For decades, no realistic alternative existed. That is now changing. The first pillar of this shift is a proposed framework often called BRICS Pay. Not a single app, it is a payment architecture designed to connect national systems like India's UPI, China's WeChat Pay, and Brazil's Pix directly, using blockchain-based settlement layers that bypass US and European banks. In this setup, a rupee can be exchanged for yuan, a riel for a dirham without passing through the old system, and if transactions don't pass through it, they can't be frozen inside it. For countries used to repeated currency shocks, this isn't innovation, it's insurance. The second idea is even more ambitious and controversial. BRICS economists have proposed a new trade settlement unit, often referred to as the unit, not a replacement for national currencies and not something you'd hold in your wallet, but a neutral accounting unit for cross-border trade. Unlike the US dollar, a fiat currency backed by trust and policy, this unit would be linked to a basket of BRICS national currencies and partially anchored to hard assets like gold. The logic is simple: hard assets don't get printed, don't vanish with interest rate decisions, and don't answer to elections. In recent years, BRICS central banks have been among the world's largest gold buyers, not just for safety but for leverage. This shift has been accelerated by rising trade tensions, especially after renewed tariff threats in late 2025 aimed at countries seeking alternatives to the dollar system. While the intention was deterrence, many analysts argue the result has been the opposite, pushing BRICS nations to trade more with each other using local currencies and alternative settlement systems, compressing the timeline rather than stopping the shift. All of this converges in 2026 because India takes over the rotating leadership of BRICS. A major moment since India is often seen as a bridge rather than an outright challenger to the West. Prime Minister Modi has framed BRICS as building resilience and innovation for cooperation and sustainability, with hundreds of meetings planned across dozens of cities involving not just diplomats but entrepreneurs, small exporters, and regional banks, signaling that this system isn't designed only for elites but for countries tired of financial whiplash. The numbers are becoming harder to ignore. In purchasing power terms, BRICS Plus now rivals and in some measures surpasses the G7, controlling roughly 30% of global land, nearly half of global agriculture, and around 30% of oil production. As major energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE began aligning more closely with BRICS, the idea of oil trading outside the dollar stopped being theoretical, because if energy can be bought without dollars, the world's need to hold trillions of them as insurance begins to fade. We are moving from a unipolar world, where one country writes the rules, to a multipolar one, where power is divided. And the BRICS strategy isn't about destroying the US dollar. It's about surviving a world where dependence itself is a weakness. But here's the part no one agrees on. If the dollar stops being the world's emergency currency, who actually pays the price? Will it be governments that lose leverage, banks that lose dominance, or ordinary people who wake up to inflation, unstable savings, and higher costs of living? Is this the beginning of a more stable financial world, or the start of global fragmentation on a scale we've never seen? Share your thoughts in comments. And if you want more breakdowns of the forces quietly reshaping global power, subscribe.